ban.
Now, the three distinguished speakers here, Bu Connie, Pak Noel,
Yes.
Pak Marco, do you want to?
May I, Darwish?
Connie first?
Yeah,
You for me? Okay. just-
Yeah. And after that, the public, okay? Yeah.
No, I think I'm not going to respond. I'm going to ask Pedro more to what does he mean by the new form of sovereignty? Because if you mentioned about the block of regionalization, that become a new issue. For example, I live in Asia Pacific, and I think the Asia Pacific regional issue is not driven by the NATO issue or some not global north issue. For example, from the military perspective, now there's new blocks coming into the region. The five power defense arrangements already there. Then the Quad is there. Then AUKUS is there. Then if you see all the white paper of France, white paper of British, white paper of German, white paper of Italy, white paper of even Japan, now they are really trying to be in our region, controlling the region. So I Pedro, just give me any idea what form of sovereignty you are talking about. The second thing, since yesterday I was like mentioning something, what non-climate movement can do, to solve the very big issue, why 1 billion people controlling 7.6 billion people with the power of economy. How to at least balance that? That is, I think, the big question we have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. But
Now,
thanks.
Noel.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
First, I think that in strategies, we have to consider the game theory. Game theory, I think, is used by military actors and politicians actors, but not in social sciences, in strategies. You know, the most patterns, the zero-sum game, the win-win game, the lonesome one game, and so on. But if we consider that it's another paradigm, sort of the, for example, harmonization. Economists, the first who tried to get out from harmonization was Gunnar Myrdal. He wrote a book in 1930, The Political Elements in Economic Theory. That's one of his first book. But in the filiation of Knut Wicksell, at the Swedish School of Economics, Stockholm School of Economics, they founded an approach, a macroeconomic approach, based on institutionalism. So in that perspective, it changed from market as a game of supply and demand. It's that there are actors who have values, and Myrdal tried to show how to consider values in economics, how to consider institutions in economics, how to consider culture in economics. Veblen did the same. Torstein did the same. Commons also. But Myrdal brought all that consideration in macroeconomics. Veblen, Torstein, Commons, it's what microeconomics, micro, not macro, the large, yes. So I think if we consider the institutionalist approach of strategies for state, for policy making, we could change our perspectives. I think that's the first point of methodology and conceptual. But what we have had after these considerations, I think the problem is how to build institutions and coordination between non-alignment actors, between South-South actors, between BRICS actors. We know that more of them are in organization located in the region or in the continent, but how to coordinate? For example, African actors, they belong to African Union. African Union tries to have a coordination for the international politics, diplomatic politics. So the same states, the same government have to belong to other organizations. How to coordinate it? I think that's one of the problems. Coordinating non-alignment movement position or leadership with continental or regional position or national, that's the challenges. The challenges, I think it's possible to reconsider it if we have leaders that can be implemented in the non-alignment movement. In Africa, it's coming with some leaders, but it's if you consider Mali, if you consider some countries, new countries, it's possible. Yes, yeah, okay. I think that's important. But about currencies, Professor Pedro, I think said many things interesting, but that changes about what is money, what is the function of money in economics. That's not only for exchange, but it's a political report, social report, domination about money. So I think it's a great challenge to build something. So I would ask to Mr. Obama, what about money in Africa? The franc CFA in Africa. What about the position of the leaders in the crisis like Ukraine? But multipolarism, yes, but can African Union build a common strategy in coordination with non-alignment movements? Okay.
Thank you.
That's some
Yeah.
issues.
Marco.
Okay, Marco.
Yeah.
Elements that stimulate me more. Concerning migration, there is an aspect that we consider very important. It's so-called circular mobility. It is, we did an experience at the international level in specific reports, even promoted by the World Bank and the center specialized in the area where the migrant flows are very strong. So the basic idea is, okay, we consider all the tragic and dramatic effect, but let's create a condition in which an immigrant can emigrate for many reasons and come back. So this implies intervention at bureaucratic level, at the social level, the recognition of professions, of level of experience, and so on. If we add this idea of circular mobility, I think it is an element to integrate the migration problem. But we open the way of better solution, better prospects, and the hope for the people. I go away, I'm obliged to go away, but I have the condition to come back. This implies cooperation among the states, among coordination bodies, and so on. Other element, in Bandung conference in Indonesia, we start to make a very concrete, give a very concrete contribution, including last 20 countries in parallel with the G20. This is up to you, Darvis. If we go on in this way, and this experience can become permanent, we design the possibility to have a clear idea of the unbalance in the world economy, world economy, and we oblige the G20, that means the richest economies in the world, to compare organically with the less development reality. So we include at international level a permanent element of confrontation to have just a G20 plus last 20. This gives the idea of the big efforts that must be done to rebalance the situation. Third element, new sovereignty. This is the real problem, because the new sovereignty is designed at the moment by the multinational of digital system that control our life completely. And so there is a big conflict and a big contrast in terms also cultural, because I look at sovereignty of my states, but in the same time, I'm citizen of the world. I'm going without borders, like this morning. There is somebody who is designing a new sovereignty, new concept of sovereignty at international level. And these are not the states. So this implies, if we want to correct or to give a contribution, so to pay a lot of attention about the relations between soft and hard law. Okay, in the G20 and other coordination bodies, I take a lot of agreements, I design recommendations, but how are they translated in hard law? So I have to control this, to push in this, because otherwise, if they remain only at the level of soft law, okay, I do very good documents, but I don't have effects in the reality. I finished with this type of approach that is years ago in the 70s. We had in Italy the visit of the Premier Thatcher. Was presented to all the ministers. When he arrived to the Minister of European Affairs, what are you doing? And I'm a coordinator of European policy. And she said, coordination. Coordination is nothing. We must see the decision. So that's why we must pay attention from soft law to hard law.
Thank you, Marco. I saw
is nothing.
I saw several people raise hand. Well, I saw you.
I will take 3 minutes.
But,
did you? Yes.
mais soumettre
Did you?
Hayek,
Ananta
on
and
parlait que
this
la
one.
coordination.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay.
C'est
Context of
Hayek, yes.
Bravo.
Ouais. Mais
in
Hayek,
context of
coordination,
cryptocurrency,
mais elle a même invisible. La coordination, c'est la même équipe. Wow.
Yes,
Yes, go ahead, yes. Oh,
in the context of cryptocurrency, artificial intelligence, ravages of COVID pandemic, as well as severe war in Ukraine and earthquake in Turkey, various interesting women's movements have emerged. I will cite a couple of them. Women's movement in signing back against the civil marriage code, women's farmers movement to repeal the labor laws, women's movement in Ukraine as well as in Iran lead to several pointers. It shows that women are the worst sufferers because of their inferior status in health, education, and lack of employment opportunity in informal sector, and their status in the house as caretaker, and they bear triple burdens. And hence they've started movement to achieve dignity, equality in terms of reaping the fruits of growth equally along with other communities and as well as men. I strongly feel that unless their issues are not addressed, world peace, equality, and sustainable coexistence with the Mother Earth will not be achieved. Last but not the least, they are the source of the indigenous knowledge, and they are the caretakers of the health in the family. Thank you.
thank you, Bijou. I saw also that Jean-Cédric needs to answer the question of Noel, but since I have promised to Ananta and Iswan, short, everybody very short, okay? Ananta Giri, then Iswan, and then Jean-Cédric, okay?
Okay. The question was about the African Union. What can the African Union do to solve the issue of migration? I think human rights with regard to G20 declaration. Well, the first thing I will suggest is that the African Union should work towards the diplomatic efforts to preserve the security of its nationals abroad. I have quoted an example of one of my relatives who was rescued by our embassy in Ankara. This is at the unilateral level. But at the African Union level, I'm not saying that efforts are not yet made, but I believe more efforts should be fought about the security of African nationals all around the world, but especially in G20 states. And we can admit that G20 states are advanced nations, even if we have some emerging nations within the G20 state. Okay, but last thing I would like to bring as a contribution is that over efforts should be discussed and negotiated in a legal framework, examining the possibility for African nationals to legally cross G20 states. And for this reason, we have to identify why is it that people want to migrate to other nations. Let me just quote a few reasons. We have escaping conflict, persecution, religious persecution, hardship, seeking a better life. But I will just stop this on this point. A lot of people, apart from educational level reasons, people want to go to university or whatever, but most of the time, people want to migrate for a better life. That's my contribution. I hope my answer has been clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, well, I have said to Ananta, you want to say or not? Yeah, okay, Ananta, it's fine. Okay, please.
Thank you so much for all friends making this very enriching contribution. My submission is mainly to two presenters, Pedro and Dhananjay. Pedro, very interesting and new finance as the pillar of a new development. But I would like to bring the issue also of the challenge of rethinking development, the whole idea of the pluriversal. And also in terms of finance, now the challenge of going beyond financialization of the world is not just finance or money, but I would submit a new vision and practice of political economy, which is linked to moral economy, moral sociology, and spiritual ecology. And my query to Dhananjay, thank you so much. Now, very interesting, we need to really be attentive to the history of commons, which is being destroyed. But that also requires a rethinking of the historical, because much of the historical is not only territory bound, but anthropocentric. One way of really embodying a history of commons is to bring history of commons related to commons, natural commons, rivers, and also language. And while a site like language is more amenable to sectarian partition, but not rivers. So we need to, and also in terms of historiography, how do we bring the notion of contingency? So we need to bring contingency as transcendence, as alternative to the destruction of common histories and creation of new common histories.
It's okay. Thank you. Now, Iswan.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to also reflect briefly upon the migration topic. And I think it's important, yes, to underscore all the efforts of the continent-wide framework, and that is, of course, the African Union. But we should look into the macro regions as well. And there are, as we know, all of us, there are AU-accredited regional economic communities, such as, for instance, the East African Community. And lately, and that was about a year ago, there was a very promising process launched in Kigali, Rwanda. And actually, that's a regional consultative process, the RCP on migration mechanism. This was established in Rwanda's capital. And basically, this is planned to address migration and migration-related issues in a holistic manner. And I think that's ever so crucial. Holistic in the sense that, yes, we need to look into, at the same time, all the interconnecting insecurities and all the policy options and others. And this might be exemplary not only for the macro region, but the entire continent, as well as, I would say, in a more global sense. So yes, looking into the various different categories of migrants and the different processes driving mobility in general. But at the same time, when we heard from our dear colleague who needed to leave, that's what she said. We are not doing the right thing to help them to stay in their home countries where they wish to live. Okay, a lot of questions, what is the right thing? Who are we actually doing the right thing? Who is this we, And it must be them first and foremost. Going back to, the Ghanaian economist, George Ayete, African solutions to African problems. So first and foremost, that should be embedded in the regions. And I think that might be an exemplary way from Kigali and the East African community for the entire continent. Thank you.
Oh, no, doesn't work anymore. It's okay. Okay. Thank you, this one. Now, well, time is already passed, but if Pedro want to react,
yes, of course.
Yes, okay.
Pedro, yes. It is impossible to give a sensible answer to all these very interesting and crucial questions. But just as an invitation, Darwis, maybe you can be kind enough to organize in another date a Zoom meeting to discuss in depth this type of issues, because even the problem of migration is related to this oppressive financial architecture through remittances. And this weakness could be transformed in one of the fortitudes of a new type of people's design financial architecture, because this liquidity in the visas that came from the remittances, in the case of Ecuador, they are very important. In the last 1.5 years, we have 200,000 people expelled from my country because of economic and political reasons. 200 in a 16 million inhabitants country. You know, this is the basic nature of this situation is the class war against the peoples. We need to transform this weapon from the imperialist powers into a response from the peoples. And it's very clear to this task of defetishization of money, of currency, and commodity, pass through this new relationship between values, moral values, the validation of the work of women, for example, the validation of the ancient knowledge in terms of, and wisdom, in terms of medicine, in terms of agriculture, in terms of ecological equilibria, that has been totally obliterated, totally strangled by the epistemic warfare from the imperialism and by the colonization in our knowledge. But it's also colonization in terms of the economic thought, even among the leftists, even among the progressive. The only possibility of a new financial architecture is to copy what has been the crazy idea of the neoliberal euro and the Maastricht Treaty in Europe. On the contrary, we need to build up new capabilities. At the subnational level, let's talk about local currencies. Of course, this is illegal all around the world, but we need to build up new possibilities from the technologies of information, the computation, the internet, the possibilities of building up another type of compensation of clearinghouses at the local, at the community level. Is very promising in terms of the mobilization of social energies, in terms of other type of priorities, precisely creating a new type of values. The moral values, the values of life, facing, not in terms of wishful thinking, but facing in operative and efficient terms, the oppression of the values of the market. Life against capital, life against speculation. And that includes the need to impose other type of priorities, other type of values at the nation state level. That is why we need another type of financial architecture at the national level. But that is not enough, because this fracture of globalization, this new type of protectionism, in terms of Trump, in terms of the currency war, in terms of the technology wars, etc., is going to lead this global south to a new debt crisis. So the restriction, the expropriation of the capabilities of deciding at the local level, at the national level, at the regional level are imminent. We are facing this challenge right now. So what is happening now with the franc zone in Africa is the most explicit mechanism of restriction, of national restriction, of mutilation of the policy space. Dollarization in the case of Ecuador, in the case of El Salvador, in the case of Guatemala, but also hyperinflation, like in the case of Zimbabwe, like in the case of Venezuela, are part of the economic and financial warfare against our countries. We need to build up other technical capabilities, like Bank of the South, Bank of the BRICS, the new type of bank, investment bank. But if we reassume the global monopoly of the dollar in terms of credit, we are going to feed back into the same mechanism of operation. Again, it is impossible to answer with precision this situation. just let me show you the immense possibilities right now to create other bridges of South-South cooperation. You have in Asia the Chiang Mai initiative, but right now it is impossible to make it operative because of the surveillance of the IMF and the surveillance of the United States Treasury Department and the surveillance of through the Bank of Japan of the real capabilities of this spaghetti of bilateral relationships that could be transformed into another issue, another possibility of development, another possibility of liquidity, another possibility of balance of payments, defense of our country's sovereignty against the hostility and the volatility of the international markets. If we can build up mechanisms of coordination and cooperation between the bloc regional initiatives like the Chiang Mai in Asia, like the African mechanism that have been very, very fast, very rapidly enhanced during the last few years because of the transformation of the payment system all around Africa, and the possibility of the new regional financial architecture in Latin America with the Bank of the South, we can, in very few months, we can transform the economic international order in order to build up, in order to make a real possibility, the multipolar world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So with these words from Pedro, we end our session, and we will be split into parallel sessions in the afternoon. So thank you very much. We will end this session, okay? And so have a nice day. We will go to restaurant, university restaurant. I hope that there are still food. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.